The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
The Paranormal View. The Paranormal View. Time now for the Paranormal View. The Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network. The Paranormal View.
Welcome everybody to the Paranormal View right here on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. And for those listening from around the world, we love that you're taking the time to drop by and listen to us. But if you're not here with us in the chat room, come on over, para-x.com, and just hit join in, and you'll be here with all these wonderful people, be able to interact with them and with us by being able to ask us questions of our guests. So we have a pretty nice chat room filling up real good tonight. I've already got people sending me questions for our guests. And I want to take a second to thank everybody for being here last week. We have just had a tremendous response about the people that we had on the show last week. So we hopefully maybe can get them back on again sometime in the near future and go over that again.
Yeah, it was cool to listen to all that I missed.
It was a good show. They did a good job. I mean, there's a lot going on in that house. So
I know. I'm wondering whether or not that's what was causing the Skype problems with me. Just kicking me out.
I could see that if it was messing everybody up, but just you. Come on, Jeff.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
They don't like actors.
Oh, what it is. Well, tonight we have with us Barbara Duncan.
That's me.
Miss CC.
Yep.
And we have Jeffrey Gould with us.
Hello. That's me.
Kat Cloco is not with us tonight. She is off somewhere.
Somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. She went to the moon to see green.
I think she went to some sort of a festival, but I do know she indicated that she might be staying at a haunted bed and breakfast.
That's next week. This week.
Oh, that's next week.
She's at the Brunberry or Brewberry or something like that. It's a music festival they have in Cincinnati. So she is down there with that. And next week she's going to be in Cleveland at a wedding, and she's staying in a haunted hotel. So she'll be able to tell us if she got haunted or not.
Yeah, I told her to let them know in advance they should put her in the most haunted room.
I'm sure she'll probably try and go there. So with that, Jeffrey.
Hello.
Why don't you introduce our guest?
Absolutely.
Before you do that.
Okay.
Yeah. If you do have questions tonight, private chat them to either Ceiling Cat, Jeffrey Gould, or myself, and we will get the questions right over to our guest. And now, why don't you introduce our guest?
Absolutely. Well, tonight our wonderful returning guest is Thomas P. Fusco, who has devoted nearly 3 decades of research into the relationship between mind, physics, spirituality, parapsychology, scientific anomalies, and paranormal phenomena with the goal of uncovering the unifying cosmological framework that has eluded mankind for generations. His book, Behind the Cosmic Veil, is available at his cosmicveil.com website. He has been awesome during his previous guest appearances on the Paranormal View. And between the previous visit and now, we happen to find out that he's a fellow Doctor Who fan. Hooray! So welcome back, Thomas Fusco.
Thanks for having me back, guys.
Welcome. Glad to do.
Of course, that means your street cred went way up that you're a Doctor Who fan, just so you know.
It's smaller outside than it is inside.
Exactly. I thought you said you hadn't seen the current eras.
Oh, it was like that from the beginning.
Oh, the TARDIS was always.
Oh, well, yeah, but the joke has always been that everybody who always says it's larger, it's bigger on the inside. And one of his most recent companions, he's waiting for her to say that, and she literally comes in and says it's smaller on the outside, and he's like, "Oh, that's different."
Okay.
Well, I always kind of twist things around and look at them from the other way, you know?
There you go.
Well, sure. You got to be able to see the other side.
You have to be able to see the paranormal view.
It's thinking outside the police call box.
Oh,
Yeah.
is that what it is? Now, one of the things that you had in your little thing that you sent out to us, why is it so important for investigators or investigations, I guess investigators, to learn certain fundamentals of science, including how to conduct scientifically relevant experiments in the field?
Well, the important thing about that is that what we're dealing with paranormal phenomena, actually has something to do with the laws and principles that govern the universe, because everything that is observable, everything that is measurable, everything that is recordable, as so many of these different types of events are physical. If they were not physical, they could not be observed. They could not be measured. They couldn't be, quantified or recorded in any way. So there must be something going on that has to do with the way that the universe is put together. And since the standard models of physics don't really accommodate paranormal phenomena or allow them to occur, this is a very important part of research. So if we're going to research this type of phenomena, we need to do it in a scientific way, with scientific approaches. And that's something that is very difficult to do because it's very exacting. Even a lot of investigative teams that say, well, we use a scientific approach. In reality, they're not. Most of the time, they're being no more scientific than thinking, well, since we're using modern scientific instruments, that we're being scientific. But as I'm fond of saying, that's no more scientific than a tourist wandering around the countryside with a highly sophisticated digital video camera. That tourist is not conducting science either. So in order to help the body of human knowledge to acquire the kind of information and data that will not only validate paranormal phenomena, but also contribute to a greater understanding of how the universe is put together and how it actually works, it's very important for investigators to understand the scientific method and try to apply it the best they can in their investigations.
Now, I guess what are some of the different experiments that you're talking about? I mean, would doing something like spreading baby powder or something on the floor and then seeing footprints in it?
Well, that could be something that would be, it would have to be in a context of a scientific approach. For example, one of the things that has to be done is that the area that is going to be investigated needs to be gone over very thoroughly to get a baseline, so to speak. What your various measurements are on different types of instrumentation, and to work on that for a while to get a kind of, let's say, for electromagnetic background, to get kind of a ground point, so to speak, where the natural background of that area is recorded. And then, of course, if you're going to look for something that is out of the ordinary, you'll be measuring for that and comparing it to the baseline that you've taken of the area earlier. So in a way, that can contribute to a greater scientific experimental approach. But unfortunately, just one piece of information is not in itself significant. You have to have a variety of measurements that synchronize together, that cause, that equals a result, so to speak, that people can say, well, this is something that's significant. Now, if we're going to get into specifics, if we get into like greater detail, what we would want to be measuring for is an electromagnetic frequency that is not normal. Now, what I mean is that it would be in a range that natural phenomena or the types of electromagnetic radiation that we're constantly bombarded with would not be among those. It would be a frequency that we would see that wouldn't be generated by any of those other natural or man-made background radiation. And so in order to do that, somebody has to get themselves pretty well schooled on what those different electromagnetic frequencies might be, because we're bombarded with them all the time. And so when you pick up a frequency that isn't among those types of frequencies, the normal frequencies, then you know you have something specifically paranormal. Otherwise, it's very difficult to tie it down. You can have frequencies from different types of transmissions, for example. And the natural environment, the atmospheric conditions outside, can sometimes change and alter those frequencies in terms of what their direction is or range. And you could have two of those frequencies intersect and create a field that measures on a device, but would not be in a range that would be considered abnormal or anomalous. And so you could measure something and say, gee, we have a rise in electromagnetic frequency right here, and it could be absolutely meaningless in terms of measuring something paranormal.
Well, now,
but now, I just want to tag on something here, just so everybody knows. I myself am not a paranormal investigator. So what I'm doing is looking at it from a kind of a laboratory point of view, rather than the specifics of actually going out and doing that kind of a thing. My collaborative associate, David Roundtree, is the one who's the expert in all that, and he sometimes has a lot more specific information about various frequencies and what they mean than I do.
now, do you think that, I know a lot of times we pick up EVPs on a recorder, but they are at such of a low frequency that we don't hear them with our ears. Now, are we talking like frequencies which are below, like you said, below normal, which is maybe stuff that's below the range of our hearing, so it would even be lower on the scale?
Well, now what we're dealing with EVP is something very different than what a lot of people are aware of. This is where my theoretical work comes in, my theory of supergeometrics. And this is where it kind of combines with my collaborative associate, David Roundtree, with his experiment. And what my theory predicts is that electro or EVP is actually an electromagnetic phenomenon. The reason why people don't hear it with their ears usually is because it's not an acoustic phenomenon. It's electromagnetic. And so essentially what we have, and I'm kind of going around the end around on this because I would have to kind of explain my model to illustrate exactly how this kind of electromagnetic frequency emerges. But what we've found is that at the location of a paranormal effect, that there's actually an emergence point. There's actually an event horizon, which is opening up in space-time. And that event horizon, that emergence point, which structurally is very similar, if not identical, to what they call an Einstein-Rosen bridge opening. And this is where it gets kind of deep. But at the outer edges of that, what we have are electromagnetic radiation waves, compression waves, that are carrying information. And so those electromagnetic waves are projected from this emergence point. They reach a dynamic microphone, and they induce themselves directly on the coils that are in the head of the microphone. So in a microphone, what we have an acoustic diaphragm. It's designed to vibrate with acoustic waves. And then that diaphragm is connected to a copper coil. And that copper coil is wound around a magnet. So when the acoustic diaphragm moves, it moves the coil back and forth over the magnet. And that creates an electromagnetic compression wave that carries information that's specific to the type of vibration that's going on, being induced by the acoustic diaphragm. And then it goes into the recorder, and then it can be translated and played back as sound. In an EVP, what we have is an electromagnetic compression wave that carries information. It bypasses the acoustic diaphragm, doesn't affect it at all. Just like an electromagnetic wave bypasses your ear. If it didn't, we'd hear everybody's cell phone conversations.
Sometimes when I'm in a bus, it seems like I'm hearing everybody's cell phone conversation.
You're only doing one side of it mostly.
Well, yeah, but still, you want to just tell them to shut up.
So if it's bypassing that magnetic wave.
It bypasses the acoustic diaphragm, and it induces itself directly on the copper coils.
Okay.
It doesn't make the copper coils move because it's an electromagnetic field. And so what it does is it carries the information, induces itself onto that coil, and then that signal is sent into the device, and when we play it back, we hear a voice when no one heard it acoustically, because it's an electromagnetic phenomenon.
So from that standpoint, it shouldn't matter if it's a analog tape or a digital recorder, correct?
Correct. Except that, of course, we know that the digital devices can give you a bit of a cleaner type of a signal. And the recording medium itself, there is none. It's recorded in a digital format. So consequently, there is no magnetic tape that would pick up additional artifacts.
Okay.
Well, when I was at a paranormal event, one of the people were telling us about how they distinguish between EVPs, what they call EVP voices, and regular people speaking, and they showed the wavelengths. And when an EVP voice would be heard, it didn't affect the wave. There wasn't a spike as there would be with a human voice. So is that does that tie in?
Well, we're talking about two different types of input into your microphone. One is an acoustical input, which creates a mechanical movement of copper coils over a magnet that is a specific strain, and it's going to create a specific type of signal, a specific type of compression wave. Whereas when you have an electromagnetic compression wave that's carrying information that's coming in externally and induces itself directly on the microphone, that's going to have a little bit of a different quality when it's played back. So this is something that was predicted by my theory, and this is something that's been verified by experimentation, that it is indeed an electromagnetic phenomenon. One of a couple of predictions my model makes is that we should be able to record EVPs when the microphone is inside of a vacuum.
Now,
so no possible acoustic waves that can reach it.
Now that's one of the reasons when you do get a EVP, a lot of times it sounds like it's funny sounding and in a tunnel or something?
Well, yeah, because what we're doing, we are not dealing with an electromagnetic compression wave that is created internally in the microphone. We're picking up wavelengths, or I should say compression waves, that are in the air, so to speak, that are coming in from outside. And they can come in at various angles and various frequencies and various intensities. Those intensities can vary. And so it's not going to be exactly like an acoustic voice, although sometimes it can be strong enough and distinct enough to be that way. The other prediction that has been experimentally proved of supergeometrics is that we could surgically remove the acoustic diaphragm from a dynamic microphone and still record EVPs. And that experiment's been done, and that's already been confirmed. So it's definitely an electromagnetic phenomenon, but the source of the information is coming non-locally. In other words, the source of the information itself is not any physical structure
Right.
in the room itself where it's being recorded. It is information that is emerging into the local space-time of that room in which it's recorded.
Right. Well, now, what would be the difference if you actually also with your ear heard them say this?
Well, this is where my particular model allows for both. And what I ought to do is take a second and just kind of draw a little bit of a model for the listeners here so they can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Space and time is a substantive field. I'm going back to Einstein here. Previous to Einstein, the model of space was the Newtonian model, Isaac Newton's model, which he said space was an empty void. Einstein corrected that. He upgraded that. He said, no, space is a substantive field. It is characterized and defined by 4 independent variables: height, width, depth, and time. And because it's a substantive field, it actually can be bent and twisted. It's not a nothingness, so to speak. It's not a void. Of course, one of the greatest experiments in the history of humanity was when the fellows with the telescope who photographed the solar eclipse 19 years after Einstein's work was published finally proved his theory that space can indeed be bent and warped, and that light will bend accordingly through those warps. So now that we've said that, very briefly, imagine if we had a bubble of space-time, just something that expanded, like somebody blowing up a balloon slightly, or what I like to say, if you had an old rubber inner tube and it had a weak spot in it, so when you pumped up air into it, a bubble began to blow out of the surface of it. And imagine that surface of that bubble being jacketed in an electromagnetic field. And imagine further that there is an emerging collection of information that materializes inside of that bubble. In this case, let's talk about a vocalization. We know we can record voices digitally in a computer and play them back and convert them to analog. So we know that voice is, just like everything in the universe, is a coherent collection of information that's materialized. If that information, the pure information itself, emerges in our local space-time within an expanded bubble of space-time, in a bubble of time, where it begins to materialize, the outside of that bubble is going to vibrate with the frequency and the amplitude of that materializing vocalization. Now, if that bubble is jacketed in an electromagnetic field, it's going to set off an electromagnetic compression wave. that carries the information of the materializing vocalization. But the other thing that that bubble is in contact with is the atmosphere. It's the air. So what happens in this case in an audible acoustic voice phenomena is that the actual surface of space-time is acting like a speaker. And the very substance of that spatial field is vibrating with the frequency and amplitude of the emerging vocalization. And so you hear a voice that literally comes out of thin air because the actual face of space-time is acting in a way like a set of vocal cords.
So it's not exactly like a wormhole, but close to it, where you're taking point A from point B and merging it into one location.
Well, this is where Mr. Roundtree and myself differ slightly. His experimental work and my theoretical work both point to an identical physical structure as the emergence point of paranormal phenomena, which follows the general description of an Einstein-Rosen bridge opening, which is colloquially said as a wormhole. The difference is that in his idea, that what is emerging through that wormhole is something coming from an adjacent universe that comprises pure energy. And my model says that it's coming from an additional dimensional layer on top of space-time.
Okay.
But technically, an Einstein-Rosen bridge, the problem with it being a wormhole is that, according to the definition, it can only open to another place within the same universal realm of space-time.
In other words, that would just a second. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. My mind is racing about 5 minutes ahead of time here, but
say with the wormhole like that, that is one of the theories that they have as far as kind of like time travel, not necessarily time travel, but being able to travel long distances.
Yes. Yeah. The problem, of course, is that we've never recorded any evidence of an actual wormhole in space, and that the structure is very theoretical. It's not anything that we can practically demonstrate. But what I'm saying is what's interesting about this model of a wormhole is that the opening of a wormhole is a possible structure in space-time. It is the kind of structure that could be formed from the spatial field. And my model predicts that it's that kind of a structure that is responsible for paranormal phenomenon. And the experiments, primarily of David Roundtree, have demonstrated that what we indeed have is that kind of a structure that appears and emerges during a paranormal event.
So what people normally have been referring to as portals would be something along the line of what you're talking about, that event horizon.
Yeah, essentially what we would be talking about, my model of a portal is basically the same kind of a model that I have for what they call a orb, a spirit orb, is that it is a standing bubble of space-time with no information in it. In other words, it's just like an open door.
Got you.
And then when information comes into it from what I call superdimensionally, once that superdimensional information, which is not spatial and not temporal, it has no physical substance, it's just the information itself, like programming. When it drops down into that pocket of space-time, as soon as it becomes subluminal, it begins to materialize. And through that materialization, we get to see all and experience all of what I call a primary paranormal event, which is the materialization of information, which would be things like apparitions. They're materializations of a collection of coherent information. And EVPs or AVPs or other types of phenomena, audible phenomena, which are also materializations of information. They become material, they become physical, and so then they can be observed, measured, and recorded.
Now, you're familiar with, I believe it was out in Science last couple of weeks ago, maybe, of them finding these mysterious black spotches in the universe. And I think they're postulating that it is another universe bumping up against ours, and that's our physical manifestation of that other universe. Or it.
What you might be talking about is fluctuation structures that they've discovered in the cosmic background creation.
Yes.
Okay. That's been speculated from time to time. Unfortunately, the underlying peer review of it shows that these structures are not statistically significant.
Okay.
That we've known for decades that the cosmic microwave background, the CMB, has structure. And whether they would actually indicate collision with another universe is statistically insignificant. There's not enough specific information there for us to conclude anything like that.
Sure.
It's highly speculative, and it is not considered a valid or a valid conclusion based on the observations.
It still would,
It makes for real good press, doesn't it?
It still would give us an indication or an explanation for the Big Bang if through those bumps that we have with another universe of a bleed through of energy, and that's where that information or that energy that we get to create our universe came from.
Well, that's an interesting concept. The problem is that all the information that we can gather, the data, the evidence that we can gather, reinforces the model of what they call the Big Bang, that the universe emerged from a quantum singularity. And so consequently, how would another universe emerge from our universe, like to bud off or something?
Yeah.
We really don't have any physical evidence to
Gotcha.
show that something like that is going on. And what's interesting is that the models, when people speculate about these adjacent universes touching our own, they always talk about material bleeding into ours. Well, what's happening to those universes? Are they losing material? Are we the only ones that are gaining matter and energy and everyone else is losing it?
Yeah. Or are we losing energy to something else?
Yeah, and where is that measurable? Do we have a place where we can measure, decreasing entropy, which is what we would have to record? And we have no observations of decreasing entropy.
Sure.
Well, now, if they was doing that and we was getting some of theirs, it would be possible then if they're also at the same time getting some of ours.
It's very speculative.
Yeah.
It's highly speculative. And it really, in fact, I've got a book on the bench here that I've been working on called The Multiverse Conspiracy. And what this is, the thinking, if you understood the premise behind the idea of multiverses, it's almost, how would I say it? Let me find a respectful word for it.
Respectful.
It's nonsensical. It actually makes absolutely no sense at all. It's not coherent. There isn't a stitch of observable evidence.
Sure.
What we in science, philosophical speculation. But you have to understand something. There's people out there that are making money on these philosophical speculations.
Yeah, Marvel and DC Comics for one. Oh, wait.
Well, there you go. But, you know, it is something that is generated for public consumption because it sparks the public's imagination because of the public's ignorance of what the true nature of this subject is. So it feeds on ignorance. And it seems like a quick answer. But one of the reasons why some scientists like to propose it, and this is one of the dirty little secrets that underlies all this, is that the main philosophy, the paradigm in science today, mainstream paradigm, is that reality is physical, and that what is physical is reality, and that they are synonymous. Mm-hmm. And there is nothing in reality that is not physical. Everything's physical. I call them materialists. Mm-hmm. I'm not the only one that calls them that. So what they need to do sometimes, since we've run out of material causes for all the effects that we see in the universe, is to borrow material from an imaginary adjacent universe. And as long as we can borrow material from another universe, everything stays material. But there is an atheistic thread to this. Mm-hmm. And that is, if you can keep everything that's observable as a material cause, you can eliminate the possibility of anything that we call spiritual. Mm-hmm. And so I've seen a lot of spiritual people get nuts on this multiverse thing, and they're, how do I use the right word? They are sufficiently uninformed to realize that they're sawing off the very branch that they're sitting on by adopting this multiverse idea.
That's a good point. There's also, well...
This is why I don't get invited to Paracon.
Well, true. Well, I mean, you could look at the same people who say heaven, hell, and the afterlife is another dimensional place.
Exactly. This is what all you religious people have been talking about for centuries. And since science has become a discipline, we've told you that that's just poppycock. Mm-hmm. It's Alice in Wonderland. Mm-hmm. It's all physical. There's nothing spiritual. There is no God. There is no ethereal existence. It's all physical. Well, you guys are nuts. We've been trying to tell you for centuries.
But the same group is now coming along and talking about the Akashic field.
Well, in what respect? In what way? And where does that fit in their plan, in their model?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish I could find it. I came across a quote of somebody indicating that from a quantum standpoint, all reality is an illusion. But I can't find who said that. It was something I posted some months ago, and I'm trying to find that quote.
Well, it's very stimulating, isn't it? That kind of a thought. Funny thing is, here's the problem. An illusion to whom? To human beings?
I guess those who perceive it.
And this is where it gets funny, and I am responsible for bursting lots of bubbles, and I confess to it. Anytime people say that kind of some aspect of reality is an illusion, all right, there's talking about human impression, human interpretation. So what I ask them is this: okay, so this is an illusion and that's an illusion. Well, that's to a human being. Mm-hmm. I understand, and science has pretty much established, to the best of our knowledge, that the universe is at least 13.7 billion years old. And humans have been around for how long?
4,000.
Yeah, maybe hundreds of thousands of years if you stretch it. Yeah. Homo sapiens has been only around maybe less than 100,000 years. So what happened to the rest of time? What happened to the 13.6 billion years that the universe existed before man came along? Was that an illusion?
It was probably still cooling off.
But it can't be an illusion because there were no human beings to create an illusory vision of it.
That's like if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound?
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Because it sets off an acoustic compression wave.
Right.
Of course it's sound. See, this is where philosophy can be really screwy. Because it enters all kinds. Here's what the problem with philosophy is. Philosophies about reality are generated by people who are not educated in science, who want to destroy or dispel or discredit science by offering it their opinion of how they think reality is put together. But in order to do this, they have to do it in an environment where there's no standard by which the value of their ideas can be measured. And that standard is science. So they usually try to discredit science and say, well, science doesn't apply here. Well, that's great. Then whatever you want to dream of and think of is okay, because humankind's only standard by which the merits of your ideas can be measured, you've already flushed down the toilet. And that, my friends, is philosophy.
I think we're going to go ahead and take us a break now. Our time, is just run right on past our normal break time. But
this is so much fun.
Yeah. And we got questions to get to from the chat room, and we'll do all that, or start doing that when we come back from break and talk some more on that. Guess who gets to go first tonight?
Me.
Yes, you do. So why don't you take us out on a break?
I'll do that. You're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with our guest, Thomas Fusco, and your host, Henry Foister, the missing cat Coco, Jeffrey Gould.
What?
I just changed your first name.
I know this.
H. Jeffrey Gould, and me, the ceiling cat. We'll be right back after a brief intermission, so please stay tuned.
Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making Para-X part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Paranormal View right here on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and those listening from around the world. And speaking about those listening from around the world, by any chance have you took a look yet, Cece?
Question is hazy. Ask again later.
Okay. Then.
Henry, every time I hear that promo and they say, if you're listening at home or work, I'm like, how many people get fired listening to Para-X at work?
Ask Cece.
I have it on the background all the time.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. I would listen to it too if I was able to have a computer, but no, we can't do that. I want to welcome you back to the Paranormal View here, and want to welcome back Thomas Fusco.
Hi.
All right.
Can we back up just for a second here?
Okay.
And this is because I don't know, and you jokingly say that you never get invited to Paracons, but here's where
true.
You should be invited. And that is when we go back to talk about, okay, we're all here in the paranormal to discuss whether or not there is such a thing as a ghost and validate that. When you start talking about what I call the quantum effect, well, I don't call it that. It's called quantum effect. That subatomic particles are affected by observing it. How do you believe, and what the physics of a ghost being able to communicate with this side, for lack of a better term? Is the actual physical manifestation of them being able to give that burst of energy to be able to communicate?
Okay. Well, let's
see what I'm saying?
Well, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
it almost sounded like, well, if I've got air in my tires, why won't my car start?
Or, they don't have lungs. How the heck are they talking?
We gotta see. This is one of the problems in trying to. Let me back up a minute. So many people have heard so many inaccurate and wild speculative thoughts voiced as if they are meaningful and coherent, that they themselves don't recognize the incoherency of what they're saying by repeating.
You mean like listening to politicians?
These kind of ideas. Well, no, that's a little bit different. They tell you what they think you want to hear, but they can make that idea coherent. Let's take a look at one aspect of what you asked me.
Okay.
When it comes to projecting energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this field, in the parapsychological and the paranormal field, I have heard this word energy tossed around so much and used in so many ways that that reflects a complete misunderstanding on what energy actually is.
Sure.
So what is energy? First of all, it's physical. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you're asking me about a ghost or a spirit that projects energy, we would have to describe that ghost or a spirit as something that can generate energy.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that happen? What is it? What is a ghost or a spirit that it can project physical energy?
Yep. That's the question.
Yeah. Now, what I did, I'm not expecting you to answer that.
Well, I can't.
I'm not.
Nobody can.
If you'd like to try, well, there's a reason why nobody can. Is because most people have not thought the question through enough to even come up with that question and say, what am I saying? Do I actually know what I'm saying? And the answer is 98% of the time, no. And I don't mean to say that embarrassingly or condescendingly. I don't mean that. What I'm trying to get people to do is think. Think about what you're saying. Does it make sense? And most of the time when we hear the term spirit or ghost, fill in the blank, spirit, whatever you want to use for that term, and energy, there's a complete misunderstanding of what's being said. Energy is a very specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is physical. And so if we're going to use energy, the term energy, in a way that is not physical or not scientific, like a lot of the metaphysical, what I call the metaphysical pulp, likes to talk about, energy this and energy that. And then when you bring something in scientific, they kind of poo-poo it. Oh, that's not it. If you're going to use energy in any way that you imagine, then you've already done that philosophical trick that I talked about earlier, that you've taken science and flushed it down the toilet. Now, once you've done that, you have destroyed whatever standard there could be by which to gauge and measure the merits of your ideas. Now, once you're in that state, and a lot of metaphysicists do this, a lot of, the woo-woo guys do this too, then whatever you say kind of makes sense and nobody can question it because there's no standard by which it can be measured.
Sure.
You could have 1 million people listening to this and they could have their own idea on what energy is, and they're all correct because none of them are embracing science as a standard by which that word is measured, by which that term is measured. So, is a spirit physical? Does a spirit comprise energy? Well, let's take a look at that part of it. I know this is a no fun zone.
No, it's fun for me.
But this
Go for
is
it.
how you learn. This is how you think. This is how you raise your understanding above the crowd, so to speak, and above the cloud too. Most people who believe in spirits believe that those spirits contain a distinction that distinguishes a given spirit from any other spirit. Do you follow what I'm saying so
Sure.
far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sort of each being a specific individual as opposed to some sort of a collective?
You got it.
That's
Yeah.
the same way we are. I mean, we're all individuals, and it's the same way, I guess, when we pass on to the other side.
Okay. Now, if we have a spirit, each of us has a spirit that has a quality to it that distinguishes it from any other individual spirit. That we could look at as a distinct pattern of information. There really isn't any other way to see it.
You're talking about a quantifiable difference between individuals, or a quantifiable means of talking about a specific human quality.
No, because we're talking about something right now that we haven't determined a standard by which we can measure it.
Okay.
So we're not talking about something that's quantifiable. We're talking about something that's qualifiable.
Okay.
We're talking about the quality of that spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And what distinguishes one spirit from another in its distinct uniqueness would have to be some form of information. Because, let's put it this way, if you could listen to a radio station, a terrestrial radio station, for 24 hours, and you'll hear an almost uncountable amount of distinct information patterns, but they're carried all on the same wave. And that wave is an electromagnetic wave. So the distinction is not in the energy, because the energy is identical throughout the entire 24 hours. The distinction is the information that's carried on that wave. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So the
No, I know what you're saying, but the distinction of the person on the other end of that microphone is there.
Yes, because that is what you are hearing, what you are observing of that individual that makes that observation distinct to that individual.
Yeah.
Is a distinct pattern of information.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the radio wave.
Correct.
If the fella turned off or the gal turned off her microphone, the radio wave would still be transmitting.
Correct.
So this is where we have to make a distinction. We have to make a distinct distinction between the information and the carrier of that information.
Mm-hmm.
The information that comprises the structure and the size and the location of the moon could not come to us unless it was carried via a light wave.
Sure.
All right? Without that light wave, the information is not observable.
Mm-hmm.
From our relative point in space-time, the information would be unreachable. It would not exist in our local space-time realm, because we don't have a energy wave carrying that information into our local space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, let's go back to the term spirit energy. Well, is it spirit energy or is it information? This is why the medical physical conferences don't like it either.
And I tell you, they should be
this is
embracing this, quite frankly.
It's going to be
Well, here's the problem. Here's what the problem is with that. It's how people make their money and how they sell cornflakes. And the clearest example I've ever been able to give is that I can bet you a lot of money that among Bigfoot researchers, there are a certain percentage of them that kneel beside their bed at night and pray to whatever God that they believe in, that no one ever, ever, ever drags a body in. Because the moment they do, the person who drags a body in, the organization that has it, now becomes the world's leading expert.
Right.
And all the speculators and the sensationalists all disappear. No more book sales, no more book signings, no more events to come and speak at and get paid for, no more TV shows. Boom. That person becomes an instant unknown.
That's true.
Not necessarily. Also take into account if they bring in a dead one, they still have to bring in a live one.
But you understand the point that I'm making.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
It's the end of the show. It is the series finale for many of the people that are in that field.
Right.
And when you go into paranormal field and parapsychology, and especially metaphysics, you're talking about the same thing. Someone like myself is coming along with a solid script for the series finale. They don't want me. They don't want the series to ever end. You see what I mean?
Yeah, they can't handle the truth.
Well, it's not that they can't handle the truth, it's they live on the mystique of it.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a fella, I don't want to, I shouldn't mention his initial either.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, I'll come right out and say it. I was on an interview with a co-host, Brad Steiger.
Oh,
and
okay, I know who that is.
He's written hundreds of books on supernatural and paranormal. The guy hated me. And the reason why he didn't like me is because I represented something that threatens his money train.
Ah.
See, because once you remove the mystique from something, the guy that's, weaving the mystery is out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's just like, what's his name? The fella that heads up that Fact or Fake.
I know the show.
Ben Hansen. He comes out and says it. Science will never understand the paranormal. But he doesn't finish the statement. To finish the statement, he would say, because if they do, I'm out of a job. See, but understand that the public is whipped up in excitement and intrigue by this mystique. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's two parties sitting at the table across from each other, winking at each other and playing footsies under the table.
Mm-hmm.
They're both on the same side. And one feeds the other. And somebody comes in and says, well, this is what it is. Well, game over.
Yeah.
So this is one of my biggest problems, so to speak, my biggest challenges, I should say, in trying to get some of these points across and get people to actually grasp them and try to reckon with them.
Well, also, I understand that science doesn't deal with the paranormal because science deals with physical manifestations.
Yes.
And until you bridge that gap to the paranormal or where there is possibly physical manifestations, they're not going to study it at all. But also, it's the tip of the iceberg. If we find out that there really is such a thing as a ghost, then there opens up a whole plethora of possibilities. How do you communicate? What's on the other side? If it is another dimension of existence, then let's explore that. I mean, to me, it's like, I think that's why I say that they should be embracing this type of discussion.
Well, at one time they did. And even today, clandestinely, there are physicists out there who are very intrigued with paranormal phenomena, but they will not discuss it publicly because it's bad for business.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad for their reputation. And early on, science was interested in these phenomena. But there was a division, and the division was because it got weird.
Sure.
You know, again, say the phrase spirit energy to a scientist, and all he'll do is shake his head and think to himself, another screwball. So, you know, sometimes I used to make this kind of trouble also. I would ask radio hosts, you know, who are also paranormal investigators, have teams, and I would ask them, okay, you got this person that takes care of this. Okay, you got this person that takes care of this. This person does this job and that one. Great. Where's your physicist? Ooh.
They're like, well, we have our medium over here. Oh, wait.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Now, where did all the physicists go? They're all running to the door like they're in a nightclub that's on fire. They're running as far as they can. Oh, no, the cat's talking about spirit energy, man. You know. So this is why it's important for us to get our ducks in a row. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the paranormal field is involved in all other kinds of motives and motivations and goals other than the scientific advancement of human understanding. This is not what they want. They're in it for all other kinds of reasons. You know, you have a very, very, very few that are in it for scientific discovery. The vast majority of it, and I'm not talking about the people that, you know, the act of going into people's homes and trying to rid a place of an infestation, because that's something that some people do too. But what I find the vast majority of them today are, A, they're thrill seekers. They're in there to get the excitement. They don't care what that EVP meter really does, or the EMF meter really does. All they see is a spike in the meter. Ooh, it's a ghost! Ooh! You know, and I'm not trying to make fun. I'm trying to say this is the state of affairs right now. Or they're experience seekers. They just want to go there for the experience. Mm-hmm. Some of them, what I call is the ugly bug syndrome. Some of them are like the little kids that bring in an ugly bug in the house, and the mom screams and cries and yells, "Get that out of the house." Well, the little kid has found a way to exert power and control and influence over the establishment by being counter-establishment. And at the same time, he has become an expert that can handle and understand something that the establishment doesn't want to handle and can't understand. So rather than to explain that every time, I just tell them, you got the ugly buggers. So that's a part of the paranormal community too. Usually when you go to a website and you see the cartoons of the flying bats and the spooky music, and you see the photographs of all the members with flashlights under their chin, those are the ugly buggers. Then you have the trophy hunters. They're out there collecting to see if they can find the most and the better EVPs or the best pictures. They're just trophy collectors. They're like fishermen in a bass tournament in a circuit where they go from lake to lake and they find out who can catch the biggest and the most. And then you have people who are out there being highly competitive. They think they're going to be the next TV star.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so when you put these all together, someone like me is their enemy. Because somebody like me is a threat to the satisfaction and the fulfillment they get out of what they do. You see what I mean?
Yeah, because they're not up to questioning.
Well,
none of their data is not analyzable.
What I have to bring to the table adds absolutely nothing to the satisfaction that they're seeking, and in fact is detrimental to it. You know, and then out of the small percentage, that are trying to do something scientific, they don't have the education to know what they're doing. So that they're kind of stumbling into darkness, because to educate yourself is a difficult thing to do. You know, who wants to hear the EVP or the disembodied voice and be thinking about acoustic or electromagnetic compression waves and how they propagate and trying to find the source of that wave? That's no fun. It's hard. And to do it with scientific instruments, and to do it in a way, in a controlled manner, and record it in a controlled manner so that it's scientifically meaningful is very, very difficult. It takes a high degree of commitment and discipline. They want to see an apparition. Well, do they understand how light conveys information? Or even how people see? You know, how many people realize, stop and think, that we human beings are as blind as a bat? No human being from the beginning of our existence has ever seen anything.
Right.
All we see is reflected or emitted light. So just that alone, if you're going to study something visual scientifically, you have to understand the physics of vision and what is in a visible wavelength spectrum and what is not. That's hard. And then you have to set up experiments to confirm your visible observations with instrumentation and synchronize it with something else so that we know that it's not something that is a normal phenomenon, but being presented in an abnormal way, or maybe being measured or observed in an abnormal condition that makes it look supernatural. This is hard stuff, folks.
Mm-hmm. I think what we're going to do right now is take our last break before time totally runs out again. And when we come back, we are definitely going to get to some of these questions that I've got from the chat room. So we'll put that on the top of the agenda, and then hopefully we'll have time to go through some more of the questions that... I
haven't seen an emoticon that's burning me in effigy yet, so I'm still doing good.
No, you're doing good. You're doing good. I assume that also when we come back, Cece will be able to tell us where we have listeners from, won't you?
I got it lined up.
Right, that sounds good. Well, Jeffrey?
Yes, I'm all set here.
Do your...
I was going to... By the way, Thomas, I meant to say that when I go on an investigation, I don't just blindly think, there's a ghost, there's a ghost. When I either hear something or something catches my eye, I go right for it, which tends to freak out the other investigators. I'm like, how can you go towards something that's scaring us? Because it's probably something that can be explained.
Yeah, well, not only that, it's like when they asked Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? He said, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Exactly. There you go. Well, you're listening to the Paranormal View on para-x.com with hosts Henry Foister, Ceiling Cat Barbara Duncan, and myself, and the absent Cat Cloco here in spirit. Most likely in spirit, if quantum physics way. With tonight's returning guest, Thomas Fusco, and clearly a very attentive chat room. So stay tuned for more Paranormal View after this musical interview and promos.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Paranormal View right here on the Para-X Radio Network. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and those listening from around the world. And where would those people be listening from?
They are listening in the United States, Canada, Ireland, Finland, the United Kingdom, France, Costa Rica, and unknown.
Wow. That's a lot of places. And I want to take time to thank everybody for doing that. Hope you enjoy the show tonight. And, of course, want to welcome back Mr. Thomas Fusco.
Hi.
There he is. I thought
he'd take a powder there.
Yeah, I thought he transported somewhere else. Now, we're down to close to like a half hour left, and I want to get some of these questions answered in the chat room.
And I still have 5 pages of questions.
Yeah.
We're still talking about spirit energy.
Yeah. So I guess that means probably we'll have to have you back again.
Oh boy, yeah. It happens that way. Either that or you have to expand the program to 6 hours.
I can't do that because there's shows on after mine and before mine. So, but anyway, we got a question here from Sherry in the chat room. And she wanted you to talk about the paranormal in the Bible.
Oh. Well, now that's an interesting subject. When we're speaking about the Bible, or religious documents like that, we always bring in, or we have to contend with religious prejudice and religious dogma. So, for example, in the Bible, it's filled with supernatural phenomena. You can find it on almost every page. However, even in the Bible, those kinds of events were cast in two different ways. So that when a supernatural phenomenon was interpreted as coming from God, it would be described in a certain way. To where if it was coming from the devil, from evil, it would be described in a different way. Give you an example. When someone had an evil spirit, like a spirit of deception or a spirit of jealousy or this type of thing, they said that they had a spirit. But when it was a spirit of God, like the Holy Spirit, they were filled. And yet, the mechanism by which a human being can conduct a ethereal spirit through themselves would be the same in either instance. Give you another example. And I like to talk about this, the account in the court of Pharaoh, where Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh, and the Egyptian magicians, the court magicians, threw down their staffs, their wooden staffs, and turned them into snakes. And then, of course, Aaron's staff was thrown down, and it turned into a snake. It was a much bigger snake, and it ate all the magician snakes. And so one is considered good, and one is considered evil. Yet, the mechanism by which a solid piece of wood can be converted into a living creature is the same in both. And this is what religious dogma and prejudice misses. That the actual physics of that reaction or that event or that process, whatever it is the same in both. This is why I like talking about separating, looking at the supernatural or the paranormal in terms of forensics and criminology. The criminal doesn't necessarily make the forensics evil. In other words, a baseball bat can be used in a game or to kill somebody. It doesn't make the baseball bat evil or good in of itself. It's the perpetrator, the intelligence in acting it, that gives it moral characteristics. Now, if we remove that moral consideration to study the forensics, and I'm not saying that the moral consideration is invalid. I'm not saying that. Just like in a criminal investigation, it's very important not only to know who done it, but also to know how it was done. If we just look at how it's done, the Bible is a very paranormal document. There's paranormal events on every page, but they have to be kind of translated into our modern language so that we can understand it in that light. And actually in my book I have a whole chapter where I do that, where I take what I call the paranormal Bible and actually take a look at it, try to remove some of the religious dogma around it, and actually translate those events into modern paranormal terminology so that we can see the connection there.
Now, also wanted to talk about, you had a thing on there about quantum mechanics. So what is quantum mechanics?
What quantum mechanics means is that it is a set of principles and a set of laws, if you will, that describe what we observe, the workings of what we observe on a subatomic level. And so that's the definition of quantum mechanics. Quantum, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, they hear the term all the time. Okay? What that actually means is that we have, let's say, in an atom, we have a nucleus. There's protons in it, there's neutrons, other than in hydrogen. Then we have electrons orbiting. Those electrons occur, those orbits occur at very specific locations from the nucleus, valences, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when an electron gets energized, it can jump up into higher orbits. So let's say it's in its lowest orbit around the nucleus, and then it becomes excited, and it jumps into the next orbit, next higher possible orbit. The strange thing about the subatomic world is that the electron does not move from the lower orbit and transit to the next higher orbit. It disappears, it dematerializes from the lower orbit and instantly rematerializes in the next higher orbit,
Mm-hmm.
without covering any space in between. It teleports. It essentially teleports.
Mm-hmm.
And the distance between the lower orbit and the next higher orbit is called a quantum.
Now, is that similar to Beam Me Up, Scotty?
Well, no. Because quantum phenomena works by way of non-local causality. In other words, there's nothing physical that connects the lower orbit to the next higher orbit. It just disappears from one and instantly reappears in the higher one. Whereas star teleportation actually has a carrier wave that carries the disintegrated information to another location where the information is reintegrated into a physical thing. It's actually a local phenomenon because there's a physical connection between the source and the destination. In quantum mechanics, there is no physical connection. It happens basically outside the physical. This is what Einstein called spooky action at a distance.
So then, are they able to measure it that way? It's not like it seems to teleport because it's so fast, almost like a tachyon move or something.
No.
No, it disappears.
Actually, only the effect can be measured. This is what's called non-locality, or to say it out lengthwise or longwise, is non-local causality. And one writer amusingly quipped that it's like getting a black eye in Miami from a punch that's thrown in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it's like. Now, here we have this phenomenon, which they've been doing a lot of work on, called quantum entanglement.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have two, let's say the classical experiment, the classical demonstration of quantum entanglement. We take a photon, a particle of light. We split it in two. What we do is get two lesser photons. They are still full photons, but they both operate at a lower energy level. But they're correlated because they were both part of a single larger photon. And let's say one has an upspin and one has a downspin, which is how in quantum physics we talk about particle polarity. We talk about directions of spin. Now, let's say we take an energy beam and we divide those and have those two photons traveling away from each other in opposite directions. They're photons, so they're traveling at the speed of light. And we've already established there's nothing in the physical universe that can travel faster than light. The uppermost barrier of our physical universe is not a location, it's a velocity. which is light speed.
Mm-hmm.
So here they're traveling away from each other. One's got an upspin, one's got a downspin. They're correlated. Now, particle A, let's say we have it pass through a polarizing filter that reverses its spin from an upspin to a downspin. Particle B will instantaneously reverse its own spin to maintain the balance in the correlated or entangled pair.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that this can happen across light years.
Right.
Wow.
It happens at infinite velocity, which is a physical impossibility. Infinite velocity means that the information about the state of point A instantaneously exists in every quadrant of the universe at the exact same attosecond. And so that's physically impossible. So we cannot measure the cause. All we can do is observe and measure the effect. That's what non-locality is. This is what's happening, what my theory states, and what the best experiments are beginning to prove, that in paranormal phenomena, we have the exact same thing occurring, and that we have information that is non-local. It is not physically connected to the local environment, and yet its destination emerges in our local environment. But the source is not local. It's coming from something else. And that something else is most likely not physical, which goes back to our spirit energy conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not energy, because energy would have to have a local connection to the local environment. That's science, folks.
Yeah.
That ain't the latest fancy, EVP recorder. That's not it. It's something else.
And this is established. They've proven this does happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the most recent experiments was that they were able to and they call it photon teleport, which is a misnomer. It really isn't a teleport, because what's being transported is information. And they've been able to demonstrate this transportation of information over quite a distance now, several kilometers, where it's instantaneously transferred from A to B. And what they're working on is a method of communication where we might be able to communicate to the far edges of the galaxy instantaneously by using entangled particles.
Now, I've heard of twins who can be kind of like separated from a distance, and one of them might get hurt and the other one would feel the pain right then.
Mm-hmm. That is also an example of non-local causality, of non-locality. It's getting that black eye in Cleveland or in Miami from a punch that's thrown in Cleveland. It is a transmission of information that is not physically connected between source and destination. It's the same effect that we observe in parapsychology, like telepathy or remote viewing, where it has been demonstrated inside of Faraday cages that are designed specifically to shield any kind of electromagnetic carrier wave. So the information is reaching the recipient in a form that is not physical, because if it was physical, it would be material or energetic.
So then the question then becomes, if we're all part of that initial causality, that Big Bang, then we are all interconnected.
Yes, absolutely. We are interconnected. We would have to be. The very laws and principles that govern the atoms and molecules and particles by which we and everything else is made is following a predetermined order that existed in that quantum singularity that was not spatial and it was not temporal. There was no time and space. Science calls that quantum singularity infinitely dense and infinitely small. And the value of infinity has no place within the dimensional realm. A value of infinity doesn't exist within space and time.
Is that not the definition of what was termed the Akashic field, or the fact that the universe is one living organism that, well, it's hard to explain, that every causality has an effect on everything else?
Well, let's look at that term Akashic field for a second.
Okay.
Because I could tell you that. I could tell you one thing. That term was not coined by someone who was scientifically
No,
trained.
it's a zero-point energy field, correct? And
Right.
that all matter creates an... Okay.
No, 0-point energy is considered a physical phenomenon.
Okay.
But the Akasha is considered something that's outside of the physical.
Okay.
So here we are, we're doing this Akashic field, spirit energy. They're oxymorons from a scientist's point of view. It's like saying honest politician. So as soon as you're talking to someone who's scientifically trained and you introduce that kind of a term,
okay,
almost pretty much the conversation is over. The scientist has to try to educate the other person into what these terms actually do mean. And then when they do that, they find out that there's nothing left to have a conversation about because you've just destroyed the subject.
No, because if we have intelligence, supposedly, and we are a collective, then the universe must have an intelligence factor as well, a collective intelligence.
Absolutely, but you're looking at it from a metaphysical and a philosophical viewpoint. Let me give you a scientific perspective on that. When we study systems in science, like say, for example, we were going to take a model of the current weather, what it is this actual moment, and project it 3 or 4 days down the road. We're actually studying a system and all of its various subsystems.
Sure.
First thing we have to do is establish the laws and principles and characteristics which establish and determine the system and govern its behavior. And then we can study the subsystems that emerge from it. But here's the thing. Once we establish that system, there is no subsystem that will emerge from that system that will act in contradiction to or outside of the laws and principles that establish the greater system in which that subsystem is a part. Any subsystem will always behave according to the laws and principles that govern the greater system in which it's a part. It cannot exceed or contradict those principles.
Right.
Now, let's look at ourselves as human beings. We are a subsystem of the universe. And we are intelligent, we are alive, and moreover, and this is another subject for a different show, we have a creative ability. We can materialize information into the physical world. Most people if you're sitting in front of a computer right now, folks, you're looking at a materialization of information that came from a human mind. So that means that if we're a subsystem of the universe has to be intelligent, alive, and creative. Otherwise, we would have to say that the system gave rise to a subsystem that contradicts or transcends the laws and principles that govern the greater system that gave rise to it. And that is scientifically not have way. So just based on scientific principle and argument, the universe itself must be intelligent. Now, scientists don't like to go there because they consider that the realm of psychology and, philosophy and all that. They kind of run to the door when this is talked about. And I grab them by the scruff of the collar and pull them back and say, hey, no. You're a physicist. Is the human brain physical? Thank you. The study of physics is the study of everything physical. You can't run away. You have to come here and sit at the table.
sometimes I just picture you running around smacking people on the head like Benny Hill on the little bald guy.
But see, the thing is that you can't bring these people to the table until you frame the argument correctly. And if you're going to frame it with nonsensical statements that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, you're not going to bring them. They're just going to sit back there and continue to laugh at you. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about akashic field. Right. Okay, what is akasha? That is supposed to be a body of data. It's like a database.
Right.
A storage house.
Mm-hmm.
What is a field? A field is a propagation of a force. So electromagnetism, for example, you have an electromagnetic field. It is the wave propagation of the particulate form of that wave, which is an electron. So you have an electron, you have electromagnetic field. The field itself is not information. The field can only carry information. So the akashic field is like saying honest politician. It's a conflict in terms. Because a field itself is not information, and akasha is.
Okay.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So akasha could be, the information might be able to be conveyed by a field, but the akasha itself is not a field. Otherwise, it would be diffuse and would carry no distinct information. Ouch.
Not ouch for me. This is good talk.
This is why scientists run to the door.
Yeah.
And so people say, well, if you're going to abandon us, we're going to abandon you. And so when they go into these things, they abandon science. Most metaphysicians that really get into it, when you go into their websites, you will find a page where they've written how bad science is and how awful science is and how inadequate science is. And so once they trash science, then they're free to imagine whatever they want, and it sort of kind of makes sense because they have no standard by which to measure the value of their ideas.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, we are down to about our last 8 minutes, maybe 9. Did you have something, Jeff?
No, I was just looking at the clock myself. And
now,
I'm looking at it going, darn.
I've got questions here, and I know as soon as I ask one, it's going to be taking up more time than that. But
well, give it a try, man. We got time.
Maybe you can give a roundabout thing about it. Anyway, you had on there talking about aliens and UFOs. Any validity to them, and how are they connected to quantum physics?
Well,
that is another 3 hours.
Well, let's talk real briefly. Let's tackle aliens first.
All right, that sounds.
Which is easy because they're so small.
Live, then anywhere in the universe that there is sufficient activity, molecular activity. Now, listen to what I just said. Anywhere in the universe where there is sufficient molecular activity to sustain complex structures and to give rise to complex structures that are able to be sustained over a period of time, you will have life. Period. Let's take a look at the Earth. Highly active molecularly. And that complexity forms complex compounds that are able to be sustained in a fluid environment. That's what gives rise to life. Take a look at the moon. It's dead. There is no complex activity. It's just a rock floating in space. There's no life there. So anywhere in the universe where the chemistry is correct, to where we have complex activity, dynamic activity that forms complex structures and compounds that can be sustained in a fluidic environment, you're going to have life. That's my look on it. So, are there aliens? You better believe it is. Now, about UFOs. If we remove the criminology, because in the paranormal everybody talks about the ghost and the spirit, disembodied intelligence, on and on. Yeah, they're a consideration. But let's put them in the back room for a minute. The aliens, we talk about black ops or UFOs, aliens, black ops, whoever, the Illuminati that've been here for 20,000 years, the remnants of the Atlanteans, so on and so forth. Let's take those perpetrators, put them in a room with the ghosts and the spirits. Let them wait outside for a minute. Take a look at the actual phenomena themselves, and you'll find that UFOs pretty much follow the same characteristics that are observed in paranormal phenomena. They do the exact same things. There's an aspect of reality, laws and principles of reality that are being displayed in these phenomena that we don't understand yet. Mm-hmm. My theory opens a door in the way that we can, a vehicle by which we can, a roadmap by which we can understand some of that stuff. But if UFOs are intelligently designed craft, I maintain that intelligence, whatever it is, has cracked the secrets of the natural laws behind paranormal phenomena. Remember, paranormal is not technology. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's a natural phenomena, like the sun and the rain. Somebody has cracked the secrets of it and have built technology based upon it.
They would have to have created some sort of wormhole technology, if nothing's faster than the speed of light, to be able to reach Earth, where we've already looked at planets close enough to us that would be reachable by light speed, right?
According to my theory of supergeometrics bypasses all of those physical dimensional limitations. What it says is this, is that the entire universe and every structure in it is an expression of materialized information. In fact, I have a one-sentence definition for the universe. It is an expression of materialized and materializing information. Mm-hmm. And that's the only definition I've found where every single component and segment of the universe complies with that definition. Now, we have a direction of creation, a direction of materialization. There's a polarity to it. The idea that we have a time arrow, mm-hmm. that time flows in a given direction, means that this materialization process is not static. It's dynamic and it's progressive, and it moves in a given in a given direction. So we have materialized information in pockets of space-time that surround all materializations. And that is something that is fully materialized in a given polarity. If we were able to reverse that polarity, we would collapse the space-time bubble that surrounds all physical objects. When we collapse that bubble, that physical object dematerializes. It exits our physical universe. Yet, the information, call it the Akasha, if you will, mm-hmm. the information from which it was assembled still exists on a super-dimensional plane. And that information could be routed to another section of the universe. And if we have the resonant frequency of this particular address, if we find out the resonant frequency of the local space-time of Alpha Centauri, so to speak, mm-hmm. we could create an artificial bubble of space-time, drop that information down into it, and rematerialize. So, okay. Just like in quantum entanglement, we have the instantaneous transmission of information across vast distances. Teleportation over vast distances, according to my theoretical model, is possible by bypassing space-time, by going above it and dropping back into it, like going to the hub of a bicycle wheel.
Okay.
Once you're at the hub, you can drop down any spoke and land anywhere along the rim.
Okay.
All right. Well, down to our last 4 minutes. And I want to thank Thomas for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Yay!
As always, a great guest. And because we only got partially done, you might say, we will see about getting you back on. And someone was saying that maybe we could get you and Richard Roundtree both on at the same time.
That would be fun.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to do that until later in the fall.
Right. But it'd probably be that at least that far before we can get you back on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm free anytime, but David's going to be really tied up till maybe about November or December.
Okay, well, that'd be fine. We'll be in contact with you and see if we can get that set up. So with that, why don't you give everybody your website and how to get your book and all the goodies?
Yep. All the information about how to get the book, what the book's all about, a sample chapter, related articles, a blog showing where I'll be next, and of course where to buy the book, and how to get the blue pill is all available at www.cosmicveil, spelled V-E-I-L, cosmicveil.com.
All right. Jeffrey?
Yes, sir.
You can give all your stuff and cat stuff.
Let's see how quick I can do this. Well, yes, Cat Coco's official website is huntforghosts.com. Did I have to say that all again because you were just stepping all over me?
I know.
Cat Coco's site is huntforghosts.com, where you can check out her website for her graphic novel, Miss Gray. My own website is jeffgould.net, GEOFFGOULD.net/2011PNV.htm. That's my Paranormal View hub page. You can look at all our previous shows and reports and such, and embedded podcasts if you happen to miss them. At Facebook, you can do a search for The Paranormal View. There we are. Our official website is theparanormalview.com. For all your Paranormal View attire, go to cafepress.realbadgershop. I should not bother saying that anymore. No one ever does. And for anyone interested in checking out all natural health-based systems and or having for themselves or friends or loved ones with any health issues or realizing they're just plain aging, just check out my jeffgould.net/Q page and or message me on Facebook. That's jeffgould.net/Q. And that'll give you all that kind of cool information. So have a great weekend all day.
Right. Barbara, you got anything?
Facebook page, photos. That's it.
Facebook page and photos.
Cemetery photos.
Cemetery photos, lots of them.
Now, how would they find you on Facebook?
They can go to the Paranormal View website and click on the link.
Yes, sir. We have updated the site with all our bios and links, so you can go there and check that out. So that ought to be awesome. So with that, we want to thank Thomas again for being on, and stay on until after we get off. We'll talk with you for a second. And next week's guest, everybody will want to come back for this. We have Pamela Osley. She's been on before, and she talks about aura colors. So people will probably be able to get some readings too. So next week then, till then, this is Henry Foister,
Jeffrey Gould,
and Barbara Duncan.
And we will see you guys next week at the same time. So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Paranormal View. Come back and visit us again if you dare. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the Para-X Radio Network.
The Paranormal View.